I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon, light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to the end of the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is sadly still crippled by the manacles, segregation, and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives in a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the commerce of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've become here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cast a check when the architects of one Republican wrote the magnificent word of the Constitution of Declaration of Independence. They were signing the promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was to promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that the American has defaulted on this promissory note in so far as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, the American has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come from been backed marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Injustice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've become to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind American of the fierce emergency of now. Urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquility drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make the real promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial injustice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice reality for all God's children. It will be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. The sweltering summer of Negroes' legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning, and those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation's return of business as usual, and there will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted the citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm thresholds with the leads in the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggles on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community, which has not led us to distrust of all white people, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And that they have come to realize that our freedom is the inextricable bound of our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must walk the privilege that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking these devotees of civil rights, when will you be just satisfied? When can we never be satisfied as long as Negro is still a victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality? We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basics mobility and from a smaller ghetto is a larger one. We cannot be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs of stating, for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negroes in Mississippi cannot vote and the Negroes in New York believe that he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteous like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come out here to great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh and narrow jail cells, and some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith and unearning suffering of redemption. Go back to the Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums of the ghettos of the northern cities, knowing that sometime this situation can and will be changed. Let us know the wallows in the valley of despairs. I say to you today, my friends. And so though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow and have a dream, I still have a dream. It is a dream that deeply rooted in the American dream. I have dreamed that one day this nation will rise up and that live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be equal, self-evident, and that all men created equal. I have a dream that one day the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at a table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day that even the state of Mississippi, a state of sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression that will transform an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that if my 4 little children one day live in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin, by the content of their character. I have a dream that today, I have a dream today that one day in Alabama with his vicious racists, will a governor having his lips dipping in the words of interposition or nullification, one day right in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream today that one day every valley shall be excited and every hill and mountain shall be made low, and the rough places will be made plain and the crooked places made straight, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all flesh seems to see together. This is a hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With the faith, we will be able to hew out the mountains of despair and stone of hope. With the faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discords of our nations in beauty symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we'll be able to work together, pray together, struggle together, go to jail together, stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day, and that one day, that this will be a day of all God's children will know the meaning. All God's children will know the meaning and be able to sing the meaning of my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this become true. So let us freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of the New Hampshire, let the freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York, let the freedom ring of the heightened Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let the freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let the freedom ring of the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let the freedom ring the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let the freedom ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let the freedom ring of every hill and morehouse of Mississippi. Let every mountainside let freedom ring. And when this happens, And when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village, from every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day. We all, God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, we will be able to join hands and sing the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.